Previously on the story, the sheriff, Tyler Beckett, had never believed in monsters until 3 years ago when he came face to face with a werewolf in the woods. That encounter had shattered his reality. Since then, missing person cases, warning signs forbidding entry into the forest, and covert nighttime patrols had become a part of his life. Things grew even more complicated when Laura Forbes turned to him for help. Her brother Riley had seemingly fallen victim to a werewolf's bite. Desperate to protect him and find answers, Laura herself was bitten, facing the inevitable transformation that awaited her. As Laura wrestled with the grim reality of her fate, Tyler became deeply entangled in her attempts to save her brother. Their already tense relationship came to a head when Laura chose to trust Tyler, agreeing to join him in his hunt for these deadly creatures. Tyler, reserved and stoic, reluctantly began sharing his secrets with her, including the knowledge he had gathered about how to combat werewolves. Their joint venture into the woods led to a deadly confrontation. Laura, for the first time, killed one of the creatures, only to discover it was part human. That night shook the very foundations of her beliefs, forever altering how she saw the world. Now, Laura finds herself locked in a holding cell at the station, while Tyler struggles to shield her from the irreversible consequences of her condition. Despite her confinement, her determination to find a way to save her brother remains unshaken. As they begin to work together, Laura still isn't certain she can trust this enigmatic sheriff. After a tense day filled with grim revelations and danger, the two of them are left alone. Tyler offers her a cup of coffee, ending a harrowing and somber night with an unexpectedly calm moment. But will this quiet reprieve last any longer than a single cup of coffee? Tyler climbed to his office, turned on the coffee machine, and stared blankly out the window. He simply had no choice. Sure, Laura had said she wouldn't run, but trusting her wasn't easy. That cunning little fox would stop at nothing to find her brother, and in her current state, she'd give it her all to succeed. There was no way she'd pass up this chance. Running off was one thing, but what if she bit someone? Like the woman who greeted him at the door earlier? No, he'd had enough casualties for a lifetime. The thought had barely crossed his mind when the station door swung open. The red-haired woman he had met at Laura's house a few hours ago now stood in front of him. Her expression made one thing clear. She wasn't here for small talk. "Sheriff Beckett, right? How can I help you, ma'am?" He poured coffee into 2 cups, giving her a measured look. She pursed her lips and, pulling out her phone, said sharply, "Great. Are you aware you have no right to detain Laura without pressing charges, or to hold Riley? This is abuse of power. Ever heard of human rights and all that?" The phone pointed at him left no room for doubt. She was recording. Just what he needed. Clearly, she didn't know about Riley's escape. Should he tell her about the werewolves? A ridiculous idea, but there wasn't another option. "Miss Forbes, no one is being detained here," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "You're welcome to come with me and see for yourself. I even made coffee for her." The woman gave the cups a skeptical glance before turning her gaze back to him. Finally, she nodded. Laura was sitting on the bunk when she heard the sound of 2 pairs of footsteps approaching. The sheriff wasn't alone. She rushed to the bars and spotted Emma. Tyler passed a cup of coffee through the bars, and Laura gratefully took the warm cup. "See? She's fine," Tyler said. "Oh, sure. That's why you've got her locked in a cell. Is this some kind of role play? And where's Riley?" Emma asked, clearly bewildered as she looked around. Laura shot the sheriff a look, silently asking, "Can I tell her?" He gave a resigned nod, sitting down on a nearby chair. "Emma, I'm fine," Laura said with a faint smile, doing her best to sound convincing. The rest of her explanation would sound completely insane. Due to certain circumstances, I have to stay here for a few days. And Riley? Emma interrupted. He ran off a month ago. I didn't tell you because... Lara bit her lip. He's not human. And neither am I. Not anymore. Lara's smile was somber. She watched Emma's eyebrows shoot up in disbelief. Oh, did that creep drug you or something? Emma threw a sharp look at the sheriff. Did you sign anything? Spill it. Lara rolled her eyes. No, nothing like that. Riley's a werewolf now, and I guess I am too. What kind of nonsense is this? Emma threw her hands up. Lara took a sip of her coffee, wincing as the heat stung the roof of her mouth. I knew you wouldn't believe me, but I'm not lying. I don't know how to prove it. She looked to the sheriff, silently asking for backup. Lara's telling the truth, Tyler said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. We can prove it. Take off your bracelet and hand it to her. Silver. Lara tensed as she waited for Emma's reaction. To her surprise, Emma didn't freak out or storm off. She calmly removed her bracelet and handed it through the bars. Lara reached out to touch it, but the moment her fingers brushed the metal, searing pain shot through her hand. It wasn't unbearable, but sharp enough to make her hiss and pull back. No way, Emma said, more stunned than ever. Is this some kind of trick? Are you messing with me? No, for God's sake, we're not messing with you. Lara snapped, grabbing the bracelet outright. Pain shot through her again, more intense this time. Her fingers clenched despite the agony, the metal branding her skin like molten iron. She gasped and dropped it to the floor. Burn marks reddened her palm. Do you believe me now? She hissed through clenched teeth, shaking her hand to ease the pain. Emma let out a stream of curses, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. After a long pause, she finally muttered, So no one's looking for Riley? We searched for him. We even found him, but we lost him again. He's the one who bit me, Lara said, taking another sip of coffee. Her hand was already healing. Regeneration, for better or worse. And you're just casually talking about this? Emma threw her hands up again, then paused, her expression hardening. All right, I get it. You're terrible hunters. Tyler raised an eyebrow in surprise, but didn't respond. He clearly hadn't expected that. Lara chuckled, shaking her head. The full moon's in a few days. What's your plan? I'll just turn into a damn wolf and track him by scent? At least it's something, Emma shot back, her full lips pressing into a thin line. He's out there, all alone, while you're here, drinking coffee. Lara sighed. Emma always knew how to push the right buttons. Fine, you're right. But we can only go with the sheriff. There are too many werewolves, and we don't know how they'll behave before my first shift. And Tyler. Lara cast him a quick glance. I don't want him getting hurt because of me. She quickly added, wanting to make her point crystal clear. I won't be able to control myself in wolf form. Emma snorted, but said nothing this time. Lara's right, the sheriff said. She can't go alone. There's an entire pack out there. Technically, her pack, but we can't guarantee no one will attack. Or that Riley will come back with her willingly. I can go with you. He'll listen to me, Emma offered seriously. Are you insane? Lara blinked in astonishment. I thought the same thing, and he bit me. Right now, he's running on animal instincts and a need to belong to a pack. That's it. You're spouting nonsense. I thought you were dumb, but this is a whole new level. Well, aren't you just delightful? Emma said with a scowl. Think you're so tough, huh? Hey, enough. Both of you. Right now, Tyler cut in firmly, his voice calm but authoritative. This is still my station. And what if it wasn't? Laura burst into laughter. Are you even a real sheriff, or just some guy who stole a badge, feeding your ego at someone else's expense? Lousy move. And you're a lousy cop. Shut up, Tyler said sharply, his voice low. Then more calmly he added, this is all part of the early stages of turning. Verbal aggression. Let's go. He gestured for Emma to follow him to the door. We need to clear some things up. She huffed, but walked out silently. Laura was left alone. You're not going anywhere. If you want to help, stay out of the way, Tyler said gruffly, sitting down at his desk and stretching out his hands. Emma stayed quiet but looked more irritated than reflective. Finally, she muttered, Riley's my boyfriend. There's no way I'm leaving him with these monsters. Werewolves, Tyler corrected absent-mindedly. She waved dismissively. Whatever. It's better for Lara and me to handle this. You should stay safe. Emma was silent again, though this time she seemed to be thinking. After a moment, she finally nodded. Fine. I'm so over all of this. First Riley, now Lara. Are you planning to lock me up next? Lara's here for her own safety. If she shifts, it's better for her to be in a cage. At least until the full moon, Tyler explained. Emma drummed her nails on the desk, the sharp taps grating on his nerves. So werewolves only shift once a month? She asked. No. The first shift happens on or near the full moon. After that, they can shift whenever they want. Or sometimes, when they don't want to. So Lara could shift during this little hunt of yours? Emma asked pointedly. He hadn't thought of that. I don't know, he admitted, shuffling through a stack of papers on his desk. I hope not, but it's impossible to predict. Newly turned werewolves have a hard time controlling themselves at first. She'll need time to adjust. And you're still planning to take her on this hunt? Emma leaned forward slightly. Not at first, no. But after that, I mean, you do understand she might need help, right? Not from you, but maybe from someone female. Who knows what kind of problems werewolves might have? You've seen plenty of shifts by now. Aren't you bored yet? Or do you just want to humiliate her? Lara made a face and glared at the sheriff as he walked toward her cell, the jingling of keys filling the tense silence. Only an hour remained until nightfall. Lara's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She was scared but determined not to show it. No, not to humiliate you, Tyler replied matter-of-factly. I need to make sure you remove your clothes. I don't have spare sets lying around anymore. If I need to, there's someone I can pass my things to. Lara smirked. Seriously, what do you even want here, Sheriff? Some kind of pervert? But he passed by her cell without a word, sitting down on a chair across from her. Was he planning to watch? For what possible reason? Lara snorted and turned away, trying hard to pretend she didn't care. The looming transformation and the dark, unblinking eyes fixed on her made her equally uncomfortable. Maybe the stare even more so. She let out a nervous chuckle. She'd never planned to strip naked in front of the sheriff, but it was better than destroying her clothes. Fine. I'll undress, damn it. Just stop staring like that, for God's sake. He didn't answer. Snapping at him probably wasn't the best idea, but she couldn't stop herself. Something inside her was boiling, pushing her closer to the edge, closer to losing control. The aggression surged with every passing second, as did the burning pain coursing through her muscles. Still, she tried to hold herself together. I don't want to undress with you here. Is that so hard to understand? Yeah, okay. I'll step out, Tyler finally said, seeming to catch on. If you need anything, just call. Lara nodded, rolling her eyes. Beckett's communication skills were horrendous. The camera blinking overhead wasn't comforting either. He'd see everything if he wanted to. She shuddered at the thought. Hopefully, he wouldn't. She paced the cell, unable to find any relief from the restless energy coursing through her. Her arms and legs ached as though they were being twisted apart, and the dull, throbbing pain in her chest and back refused to subside. Struggling to peel off her clothes, Lara finally lay down on the cot. In just her underwear, she should have felt cold in the damp cell, but waves of heat radiated from her body. Her temperature had to be over 102 degrees Fahrenheit by now. Not that it mattered anymore. Nothing did. In an hour or less, she would become the kind of monster used to scare kids around campfires. How was she supposed to live with that? The silence in the room seemed alive, carrying faint whispers, as if something unseen were calling to her, commanding her. The relentless pain inside grew stronger, and she rolled onto her stomach with a groan. She wanted to cry, but she forced the thought away. There wasn't time for that now. This was permanent. There was no cure for lycanthropy. But maybe there was some way to dull the process? She reached down and rummaged through her pile of clothes on the floor, pulling out her phone. Anything to distract herself. Maybe she could watch a movie or Google ways to suppress a transformation. But her fingers cramped almost immediately, forcing her to drop the phone onto the cot. "Get it over with already, you damn thing," Lara muttered through clenched teeth, as if the beast inside her could hear. She hadn't felt this awful in years, not even when she'd gotten alcohol poisoning from cheap vodka on her 18th birthday. At least she wasn't nauseous this time, not that it was much of a consolation. She wondered briefly which was worse, but the thought was obliterated by a fresh wave of agony. This one was the worst yet. Like every bone in her body was breaking all at once in an endless, torturous loop. Lara curled into a ball, pulling her knees up to her chest, too afraid to breathe. Tears streamed down her face, soaking the thin pillow beneath her, but she didn't care. There was nothing left now but her and the pain ripping her apart. Then, for a brief, miraculous moment, it stopped. It was as though someone had pressed pause inside her, and Lara nearly gasped in relief. She needed the respite, however fleeting it was. She cautiously examined her hands. They still looked human. How long until the full moon? Maybe she'd get a little more time to recover. Taking a careful breath, she even managed a weak smile. But in the next instant, her spine arched unnaturally. The sickening crack of shifting bones filled the cell, and everything before her blurred into a haze of crimson. Within seconds, the human she had been was gone. The beast had taken her place. Tyler placed his coffee mug on the desk with a dull thud and turned away from the monitor. Lara had shifted, almost right before his eyes. He had seen everything on the camera, though he had no intention of going anywhere near her cell. Yet something stopped him from simply locking up the station and going home until morning. Or rather, someone. And that someone was currently howling and throwing herself against the bars, desperate to break them. Tyler sighed, rubbing his temples with his fingertips. No, he couldn't leave. The relentless voice inside him hammered away. This is your responsibility. Yours alone. With a heavy exhale, he tore his gaze from the camera feed. He needed to do something to distract himself, to make the long hours until dawn bearable. After a couple of hours, the howls subsided. The creature that had once been Lara no longer thrashed against the cage. Instead, the wolf sat motionless in the center of the cell's cold stone floor. Her broad back rose and fell with slow, steady breaths, the only sign she was still awake. The silence stretched on. Beckett buried himself in paperwork, focusing on his reports. A loud howl shattered the nighttime silence of the station. Tyler lifted his eyes from the old computer where he was drafting his third report for the higher-ups and glanced at the monitors. The werewolf sat near the metal cage door, crouched as if preparing to strike. Then, in one explosive leap, the creature slammed into the bars. The metal groaned under the force of the impact. The beast was desperate to escape. Another powerful blow. The door held firm, but the wolf recoiled, shaking its head violently. Tyler turned away, reassured for a moment. Of course, Lara wouldn't be able to break the door down. Her brother couldn't either. But the next strike was even harder, as if the she-wolf had summoned all her strength, determined to destroy the hated bars at any cost. Damn. Tyler watched the raging wolf for a second longer before a chilling thought flashed through his mind. Lara had been locked in a different cell than her brother, and as a newly turned werewolf, she might be stronger. He had read something about that somewhere. No. Better to go downstairs and make sure the lock was holding. Just in case, he should also close the door leading to the basement cells. Tyler checked his pistol. Maybe he should take a silver bullet, just in case. He shook his head, the idea terrifying him, though only briefly. If the wolf became a danger, if it came down to seconds, and if his life was at stake, he would have to shoot. He would shoot. Pushing the dark thoughts aside, Tyler hurried down to the lower level. Why had it gone so quiet all of a sudden? He slowed his pace, moving cautiously, trying not to make a sound, and peered into the room. In the dim light, moonlight cast cold shadows on the walls. Silence. He strained his ears again. It was as if the she-wolf wasn't there at all, but Tyler was certain. If she had broken the cell door, she was still down there lurking, having undoubtedly caught his scent. For God's sake, don't make a mistake, Lara, and I won't harm you. Taking a deep breath, Tyler pushed the heavy door open. The cell where he had left Lara was immediately noticeable. It hung off its hinges. That was the first thing he saw. She couldn't have escaped, though. No way. He would have noticed. Which left the second, more dangerous possibility. The sheriff tightened his grip on his pistol, his fingers throbbing from the strain. The beast was hiding somewhere close, waiting for the right moment to pounce. He didn't have time to take another step before something slammed him to the concrete floor. With such force, it was a miracle he hadn't broken any bones. The pistol he'd been clutching pressed against the warm stomach of the werewolf looming over him. Drool dripped from the creature's open mouth, but it didn't strike. A wet tongue slid from his ear down to his chin. Not a single muscle in Tyler's face moved, though God knew he was terrified. Even a regular animal was unpredictable, but this was a werewolf, a beast with a human heart beating inside it. Lara, the scent, familiar, sweet, almost intoxicating. The she-wolf sniffed and licked the human's face again. Mine. The man stared at her tensely, clutching the metal thing in his hands. A metallic device. She understood it could kill her. He was scared. He might shoot. That couldn't happen. Lara pulled back slightly and licked his face once more. The playfulness was entirely at odds with her massive size, but for some reason she enjoyed the small game. I won't hurt you. He probably didn't understand. The human scent clouded her senses, but there was something else that nearly smothered her hunting instincts. Mine. My human. I won't hurt him. I can't. As dawn approached, Lara jerked suddenly, as if waking from a tortured dream. The pistol pressed against her stomach. Goosebumps raced across her skin, sticky with fear and the cold. God, it was freezing. She shivered and only now realized she was sitting on top of Tyler. Her limbs still barely obeyed her, but Lara scrambled back as quickly as she could, landing on the stone floor. A wave of shame crashed over her, and she tried to turn away, covering herself with her hair. "Thanks for not killing me," she said, struggling to form the words. The awkwardness quickly gave way to a hollow, inexplicable feeling she couldn't quite identify. Respect? Gratitude? "And you're welcome," came the sheriff's voice. He sounded just as confused, and apparently embarrassed, though his inscrutable expression made it hard to tell what he was thinking. Oh my God, I licked him. The thought hit her like a freight train. What a cringe moment, Emma's voice mocked in her head. Lara snorted softly, then, for some reason, smiled. "I'll call your friend to bring you whatever you need," Tyler muttered, avoiding her gaze as he got to his feet. "Oh, like I can't just put on this stuff," Lara said with a smirk, nodding toward the pile of oversized clothes. "It's gross, yeah, but I'm not walking around naked until Emma decides to wake up." Wrapping herself in a blanket, she sat on the cot, pulling her legs up under her. When the sheriff returned to his office, an open door immediately caught his attention. Someone had gotten inside while he was downstairs, just what he needed. He glanced around cautiously and exhaled sharply when he spotted a familiar blonde ponytail. Miss Birkenbridge. In his office. What the hell? "Miss, breaking into the station is..." "Grounds to detain you," Tyler began. Emma turned around, arms crossed, and interrupted briskly. "Where were you?" "I've been outside for an hour. Just waiting, by the way." "Brought clothes for Lara. How is she? Has she turned back yet? Why don't you ask her yourself, Miss Birkenbridge?" Tyler sighed, marveling at her persistence. He'd never have guessed that this petite, seemingly frivolous blonde could both kick down a door and care about her boyfriend's sister as if she were her own. Emma hurried down the stairs so quickly she almost tripped on the last step, and Tyler had to offer his elbow to save the blogger from an inevitable fall. "Thanks," she muttered absently before rushing toward Lara's cell. Tyler trailed after her. He wasn't entirely sure Lara wouldn't shift again due to some unknown factor, so letting Emma out of his sight seemed like a bad idea. "Are you in pain?" "I had some painkillers with me, mostly for headaches, but if you need them, I can grab them," Emma was saying, nearly blocking the cell entirely as Lara, judging by the rustling of clothes, finished getting dressed behind her. Tyler decided to stop at the foot of the stairs to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. Lara had been through enough today in every sense, and he wasn't any better. He knew her brother always ended up naked after shifting back. So why the hell hadn't he thought to warn her? Stupid old fool. "I'm fine," Lara said with a weak smile. "Emma, take a breath, okay? And how did you even get in here with clothes?" "Sheriff wouldn't open the door, so I had to open it myself," the blogger replied, rolling her eyes. "Emma?" Lara's eyes widened. "You're kidding. Wait, you broke into the station? Kicked the door down? How? That's literally a crime. God, this is insane. But thanks, I guess." Emma beamed. "Did you really think I'd leave you in trouble?" "Yeah, right. You're my boyfriend's sister. Or have you forgotten?" Then, lowering her voice, she added, "When we find Riley, I'm the first in line to chew him out for biting you." I found it, Emma clapped her hands together in delight, her wide smile radiating pride. Animal attacks have been increasing in the woods west of Riverside. Witnesses are reporting giant wolves, but no one's been able to shoot them for some reason. She tossed a newspaper carelessly onto the floor, adding it to the growing pile of past issues, and leaned back in her chair with a triumphant grin. Sheriff Beckett's office now resembled a chaotic landfill of paper scraps. For nearly a month, they'd been buying up every newspaper from nearby towns and scouring news feeds around the clock. Finally, a lead. Laura snorted and set a coffee mug with extra cream, Emma's makeshift version of her favorite latte, in front of her elated friend. Over the course of their frantic search for clues, the two had grown close. Emma still annoyed her sometimes, but not as much as before. "I'll go tell our dear sheriff the good news," Laura said, stretching to loosen her stiff back before heading toward the archives. While Emma and she had commandeered the sheriff's office, Tyler had taken up residence there. At first, Laura considered knocking but decided against it and shoved the door open with her shoulder. Emma found something. She started, then froze in the doorway. The sheriff was asleep, his head resting on his crossed arms on the desk. A few strands of hair had slipped from his usually neat style, curling messily across his forehead. Laura stepped closer, moving softly so as not to wake him, and gently, almost too gently, touched his shoulder. Had he been sleeping here this whole time? Every evening she and Emma left for home, but Tyler always stayed behind. Who would have thought it was this bad? Tyler stirred, rubbing a hand across his face in a futile attempt to chase away the remnants of sleep. He glanced at her, his expression embarrassed, as if he didn't want her to see him like this. "They've spotted a wolf pack nearby. I can't sense much, but I think Riley's with them," Laura said as casually as possible, though she didn't step back. "How long have you been sleeping here, huh?" Her tone was deliberately stern. 2 weeks, Tyler admitted, sitting up and stretching his neck. He moved to rise from the desk, but she placed her hands firmly on his shoulders, not holding him down, but making it clear she wouldn't let him leave. "Seriously, don't you have anything better to do?" Laura smirked, beginning to massage his shoulders lightly. She could have pressed harder, but she was wary of overdoing it with her newfound strength. "I was making silver bullets." "Emma gave me her bracelet," he explained seriously. His muscles felt like stone under her hands. Laura let out a playful snort. "Hey, relax. I'm not going to bite you. Promise. Unless you ask, of course. Not funny." Tyler sighed, leaning back in his chair without much resistance. "Oh, come on. I think it's hilarious." Her hands kneaded his uniform shirt, occasionally brushing against the bare skin of his neck. Laura swore it wasn't intentional, but who was she kidding? She liked him. Even her wolf side, at least for now, wasn't planning to harm him. That had to mean something. Still, the memory of her transformation filled her with lingering shame. Licking his face, what the hell had she been thinking? Disgusting. She was grateful Tyler hadn't mentioned the incident even once since. "If we leave tomorrow morning, we can be back before the full moon," the sheriff said thoughtfully, breaking her train of thought. Laura nodded automatically, mentally calculating how many days remained until her next uncontrollable shift, and the endless cycle every month after that. Tyler didn't notice her reaction and continued. "I think a couple of shotguns will be enough. We need to figure out how to lure Riley out so we can take care of the others." He spoke so calmly, so coldly, as if it were something mundane. Not her brother. Not the fact that, in the worst-case scenario, he'd be trapped in a car with 2 werewolves. Gruesome images flashed through her mind. A flipped car. Riley and her, both in wolf form, circling the wreckage, waiting to strike at the sheriff trapped inside like prey. She shuddered. "Laura." Tyler flinched. She hadn't realized her nails had dug into his shoulders, tearing through the fabric of his shirt. She quickly pulled her hands away. "Sorry. You're too strong for massages." Tyler stood, and though she couldn't see his face, she could tell he was smiling from the tone of his voice. A rarity. She shrugged nonchalantly. Then next time, you're the one giving the massage." He didn't reply. When she looked up, she found him staring at her, intently, unwaveringly, as if trying to see into her soul, or the beast hiding inside her. Had he ever looked at her like that before? "What?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you want me to focus on tomorrow's hunt and—" "If we can't take Riley," he interrupted, his voice suddenly serious, "or if he shifts, promise me you won't insist. Promise me you'll let him go. I won't hurt him. But just promise you'll walk away. Leave Riley? Just like that?" The thought alone made her blood boil. "What do you mean? Are you kidding me? He's my brother." Tyler gave a restrained nod. "Yes. And he turned you, which means he'll call for you. Just promise, Lara. Please." She froze. Everything inside her rebelled against the idea. How did he expect her to do that? Maybe next, he'd ask her to shoot Riley herself just in case. Lara took a step back, glaring at the sheriff from under her brows. "No, no?" he repeated, as if he couldn't believe it. "No," she said louder, her voice trembling with emotion. The wolf inside her stirred, clawing to get out. Lara clenched her fists, digging her nails into her palms to keep herself grounded. "I'm not leaving him. Not after everything. Got it?" Tyler blinked, frowning for a moment, but his face quickly returned to its usual unreadable expression. "Then you understand I'll have to kill you both." It wasn't a question, though Lara desperately wished his words didn't sound so final. So much like a decision Tyler had made easily, without hesitation, the moment she pushed back against him. "Oh, is that how it is?" she said bitterly, a sharp, angry smile curling her lips. "Then what's the point of waiting? Do it now. Go ahead, and tomorrow, finish off the rest of the pack. Come on. Try to lay a hand on Riley and I'll kill you myself." The beast inside her growled, bristling at the perceived threat. Lara took a ragged breath, fighting to maintain control, but her rage clawed its way to the surface. Her nails lengthened, sharpening into razor-like claws. She couldn't transform now. She couldn't. Emma was in the next room, oblivious. They would all die if she lost control. Tyler took a step toward her, seemingly unfazed by the danger, or perhaps convinced he was doing the right thing. "Was this how you dealt with a werewolf teetering on the edge of transformation?" Lara almost laughed. "Go ahead. Step closer." A vicious thought flared in her mind. "It'll make it easier to rip your throat out." She flinched as his hands rested lightly on her shoulders. Every instinct screamed at her to break free, to run. He would kill her. He had a gun, unless she turned first and ended it herself. It seemed like he wanted to pull her into a hug, but Lara jerked away, almost snarling. Tyler raised his hands in a gesture of surrender and winced. "You're insane. Listen, I get it. I understand your resolve, Lara," he said quietly. His voice was muffled, and was that a lack of threat she sensed? The wolf inside her perked its ears, straining to listen. I had a brother too, and I was terrified of losing him, so terrified. But it always ends the same. I couldn't protect him. He wasn't killed by monsters, but by people. He was special. A big kid, taller than me by 2 heads and much stronger, but too trusting for this world. And me? I was too busy hunting werewolves to notice the predators in human skin right under my nose. I lost him, and I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. His words came haltingly, as if each one cost him dearly. The sudden confession jolted Lara out of her rage. The beast inside her fell still, retreating, giving her space. She held her breath, sensing her control return little by little. Why hadn't he told her this before? "We'll get Riley back," Tyler said, meeting her eyes directly. "And I'll take you both home. Promise?" She wanted so badly to believe him, to trust that these weren't just empty words meant to calm her down. "I promise." The sheriff stepped closer again, this time more decisively, and pulled her into a firm but careful embrace, as if seeking her permission. His arms wrapped around her shoulders, holding her close. Lara hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his chest. They were more alike than she had realized. She wanted to tell him that she didn't want to lose him either, that she was terrified of tomorrow, of losing control, of hurting or biting him, which wouldn't be much better. But the words wouldn't come. Right now, it was enough to stay quiet. She could ask her questions later, maybe tomorrow when it was all over. "And where have you two?" "Oh," Emma stopped mid-sentence as she opened the door. "Should I come back later?" She didn't even seem surprised by what she saw, her smile smug and knowing. Of course. Tyler awkwardly pulled back, releasing Lara. She rolled her eyes without malice. Classic Tyler. Why was he so flustered? It was just a hug. Not just, her inner voice teased. Deep down, Lara knew it was right. They set out at dawn, leaving Emma behind at the station. Birkenbridge didn't put up much of a fight, though she stifled yawns with her hand and made a point of asking what was expected of her and how she could help if anything went wrong. Lara handed her the keys to her pickup, just in case. She secretly hoped there would be no such case, that everything would go, if not smoothly, at least without major disasters. The plan was painfully simple. Kill the pack leader, the Alpha. According to legend, and backed by logical conclusions, the pack would fall apart without its leader. Turned werewolves would still sense one another, but only within close proximity. That meant Riley's only chance to break free was tied to the Alpha's death. The sheriff was sure Riley had been turned by the Alpha. At the time, there had been no more than 2 wolves in the woods, and Lara had already shot one during their first night patrolling a few months ago. The news confirmed it. The wolves were attacking as a pack, and only an Alpha could keep an entire group of newly turned werewolves in check. Lara hoped that killing the Alpha would silence the voices in her head as well. Turned, werewolves could hear everyone, but they heard those who turned them most clearly. Riley called to her often, especially at night. She resisted, but their bond was changing, from familial and friendly to something primal and alien to Lara, and that terrified her. How was she supposed to act around her brother now? How could she talk to him when they finally met? He used to just be her older sibling, but now he stood above her in the wolf hierarchy. Would that still matter after the Alpha's death? The questions felt ridiculous, but Lara couldn't stop herself from obsessing over them. The Alpha was their primary target, but to reach him, they'd have to take down several other werewolves without harming Riley. Distracting her brother was her responsibility. Lara had spent the last week practicing voluntary shifts, running off into the woods to avoid scaring Emma. She worked on communicating with the beast inside her, trying not to let it take complete control of her body and mind. Each attempt got a little better, but not good enough to give her full confidence in their plan. Brilliant plan, Walter. Flawless like a Swiss watch, she thought sarcastically, watching the trees blur past the car window. Tyler had picked up a couple of burgers at a gas station, and though she tried not to think about what might be inside, she took a large bite. Ever since she'd been turned, her appetite had become ravenous. But now, whether from nerves or something else, she couldn't eat. The burger, which tasted like shoe leather, ended up in the nearest trash can. They had agreed not to stop anywhere unnecessarily to save precious time. The full moon was just 72 hours away. They spent the next day on the road, stopping only briefly for food or gas, Emma called a couple of times, and Laura dutifully gave their approximate coordinates so her friend wouldn't lose track of them. They were in a hurry. Night fell, and an endless forest stretched along both sides of the empty highway. According to the GPS, they were close. This was the area where the wolf attacks had occurred. The car was silent except for the occasional crackle of the police scanner Tyler had left on as a precaution. Laura, dozing in the passenger seat, suddenly jolted awake, bumping her head on the car's roof. "We're here," she blurted. The voices in her head grew louder by the minute. She couldn't block them out, couldn't focus on anything else. She wanted to cover her ears, but it wouldn't help. Her pulse thudded in her temples and heat spread through her body. Tyler nodded and glanced in the rearview mirror. His expression changed instantly. "Wolf," he muttered. Laura turned and froze in horror, her eyes widening. Any trace of sleep vanished. Something huge was chasing them, a disproportionate, grotesque version of a wolf. It was the form they all took in the early stages before they learned to control themselves. She had nearly outgrown that shape. The pack knew about them. But how? Had someone been tracking them on the Alpha's orders? Riley. He could hear you too, the thought exploded in her mind. Of course, the connection wasn't one-sided. How could she have forgotten? Stupid. So stupid. But could she have prevented this? Of course not. Tyler pressed the gas pedal, but the werewolf didn't fall behind. Its yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness like two malevolent headlights. The weapons were in the trunk. How had they messed up so badly from the start? A sudden, powerful impact slammed into the car. The roof buckled under the weight of the creature. The car swerved violently, veering off course. Tyler gripped the wheel tightly, trying to regain control, but the beast's relentless blows threatened to crush the roof entirely. The car swayed erratically. Laura grabbed the wheel, using all her inhuman strength to steady it. But it was too late. Massive claws slashed across the windshield. Tyler managed to duck, but Laura could only shield her head with her arms, feeling shards of glass bite into her skin. The beast inside her yelped at the sharp pain. She couldn't shift now. No, not now. "Hold on, I'll shake it off," Tyler yelled, slamming the brakes hard. The tires screeched as the werewolf flew off the roof, landing flat on the asphalt several yards away. The car stopped so abruptly that, if not for their seat belts, one of them would have been thrown forward. Silence descended. Laura could hear her heart hammering in her chest, the wolf inside straining to break free from its human cage. She squeezed her eyes shut until she saw stars. Hold it together. Hold it together. The driver's door slammed. Tyler jumped out, heading to the trunk. Laura watched as he approached the creature sprawled on the highway. He had to move fast before it regenerated and got back up. From this distance, she couldn't tell whether it was beast or man. The gunshot didn't even make her flinch. She just stared ahead, her eyes wide open. Not Riley, came the detached thought, and certainly not the Alpha. The night was just beginning. Tyler counted his remaining bullets. The acrid smell of aconite scratched at Laura's throat, and she suppressed a coughing fit. The stuff was vile. Tyler had covered himself in it from head to toe, and she could barely pick up his scent anymore. It was disorienting, but also comforting. If she couldn't smell him, neither could the other wolves. Tyler would be able to approach the den unnoticed. She just had to wait nearby and stay away from their lair. The closer she got, the harder it would be to control herself, and she might succumb to the call of the turned. Laura swallowed nervously. No, she could handle this. It wasn't that hard. But how were they supposed to draw Riley out? Talking to him wouldn't work. She was certain of that. At least, not while they were in human form. If she shifted, she'd attract too much attention. But if Riley shifted, staying human would be pointless. Damn it. Frustrated, she kicked a pebble, sending it flying into the bushes. Tyler glanced up from what he was doing, his expression tense. "We can go with the original plan," he said. Oh no, not this again. Why was he bringing it up now? Lara waved him off. "No, we've already decided. Plan B, that's it." She would wait in ambush, draw Riley's attention to herself, and Tyler would kill as many of the others as he could. At first, they'd thought to use the element of surprise, but what was the point now? The pack was clearly expecting them. Besides, Lara thought bitterly, the first time they'd tried, the surprise hadn't worked either. Counting on brute force again would be just as stupid. The forest greeted them with tense silence. Occasionally a nightbird whistled overhead, and once or twice an owl hooted in the distance. Lara shivered. How had Riley lived here all this time? The place was terrifying. Straight out of a horror movie like Night of the Living Dead. You and Riley are scarier than any zombie now. What could you possibly be afraid of? The intrusive thought crept in. Bitter because it was true. Lara grimaced, tightening her grip on the shotgun. Tyler had said it would be enough, but Lara had refused to come without her own weapon. He'd given up surprisingly quickly. The silver bullets he'd made were just enough for the two of them, but they couldn't afford to waste a single one. Every shot could save a life, or take one. The metal warmed gradually in her hands, while the beast inside her whined impatiently, sensing its kind. "Lara, sister. Come to us. You're one of us. Sister. Come, come, come." The voices called to her more insistently with every step. If Riley had been called this way, how long could he have resisted? Tyler followed her closely, as if she were the best GPS navigator he could ask for in the vast, dark woods. Finally, through the trees, they spotted a small clearing with a forester's or hunter's cabin. It was hard to tell. Lara raised a hand, signaling Tyler to stop, and listened. Yes, the voices were coming from there, straight from the cabin. What a ridiculous place for a lair. She smirked silently and raised her shotgun. They thought she was alone. Tyler's scent was faint, almost imperceptible in the still, windless air. That was an advantage. Tyler tapped her shoulder, pointing to the cabin. "I'll go around the back," he mouthed. Lara nodded and waited. It felt like Tyler had been gone for only a couple of minutes before she noticed movement inside the house. Chaos erupted. People shifted mid-run, leaping through windows. One of them tried to make it to the porch, but was brought down by a single precise shot. Tyler, just as before, was fast and accurate. Lara wished she could be like that. He was driving them toward her. She just had to identify Riley and deal with anyone Tyler didn't take down. If they'd had time, they could have set up noise traps to block Riley's escape route. But if Lara transformed, she might get caught in them too. She needed to know how many werewolves were left. The voices in her head blended into a deafening roar, except for Riley's, which remained clear. And there was another voice. She closed her eyes, focusing entirely on the sound. The new voice didn't just call, it commanded. The Alpha. "Sister," came the voice again, sharp and invasive. It wasn't Riley. It was the Alpha's voice. How dare he? One of the werewolves spotted her, throwing a wild look in her direction before crouching low, ready to pounce. Lara raised her shotgun and fired. The beast flew sideways, writhing and howling in the grass. "A wolf is a wolf's wolf, bastard," she thought savagely, hoping the Alpha didn't hear her. If he did, it might ruin their already shaky plan. "Lara, run, get out of here." The voice was close. Was someone really calling her, or was it another telepathic projection? It was Riley, she was sure of it. Lara turned her head, trying to locate the direction. The growls of the turned wolves, the gunshots, and the screams blended into a nightmarish cacophony. But amidst it all, she strained to hear her brother. The voice began to grow distant. "No, don't run." Lara glanced back at the clearing. Bodies lay scattered in unnatural poses, all looking human again. She scanned the broken windows of the cabin. Where was Tyler? She couldn't leave him behind. The next moment, the sheriff dove through a window and landed on the grass. Lara exhaled in relief. Alive, but an enormous wolf followed right after him, nearly tearing through the wall with its bulk. She recognized it immediately, the Alpha. The beast rose to its feet, the fur along its back bristling. It growled, a low, guttural sound, and drool dripped from its snarling jaws. Tyler wasn't moving. Why wasn't he getting up? Lara couldn't look away, frozen in fear. She had to help. She had to distract the Alpha. "Don't you dare." The Alpha's piercing gaze pinned her in place. He knew she was there, crouched in ambush. He knew she wasn't with them, and that she never would be. Lara shut her eyes, trying to block out that soul-piercing stare. Her hands refused to obey her. Her fingers felt numb and wooden. "This is my Alpha. I can't. But Tyler is right there. Obey, sister, traitor." The wolf tilted its head menacingly. With immense effort, Lara raised her shotgun. She had to fire. "Lara, please." Riley's voice grew fainter. It was like being struck by lightning. Riley. He was running deeper into the forest, scared and disoriented by the gunfire. She couldn't let him come back to the cabin, to the Alpha. She glanced at Tyler, struggling to his feet. No, she had to draw Riley away. They had a plan. Tyler could handle this. He had to handle this. Tossing the shotgun aside, Lara growled, letting the beast inside her take over. She sprinted into the darkness. Her head pounded. She needed to focus, and fast. Tyler rose shakily, gripping his shotgun tighter. The Alpha stalked around him, crouched low, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If it had been any ordinary beast, it would have ripped the sheriff apart while he was still on the ground. But this one, it wanted to assert its dominance, to instill fear. Tyler couldn't afford to miss. He fired. The bullet hit the wolf's shoulder. It snarled, baring its teeth, and stepped forward, forcing Tyler to retreat. Clearly, it wasn't going to wait much longer. Tyler ran. The darkness around him seemed to thicken. The forest fell silent, and all Tyler could hear was the dull, frantic pounding of his heart against his ribs. His vision blurred with a gray haze. Blood roared in his ears, and his breathing was ragged, making it harder and harder to keep running. The wolf didn't let up. The bullet barely slowed it. The aconite should have disrupted its senses, but Tyler had either used too little or underestimated the Alpha's resilience. Like a true predator, it was toying with its prey, exhausting it before delivering the killing blow. Tyler didn't let himself dwell on what came next. His legs carried him forward automatically. He couldn't run much farther, but the Alpha showed no signs of tiring. "Just keep running. Don't stop," the thought repeated in his mind with every pounding step. The darkness grew heavier. His legs faltered, threatening to give way beneath him. He didn't even know where he was running. Toward the car? Where he'd planned to meet Lara? But if he did that, he might endanger her and possibly Riley, if she had managed to draw her brother away. He had only seconds to make a decision. The wolf was closing the gap, moving with long, powerful leaps. The distance between them shrank rapidly, and then he heard a wolf's howl. The sudden silence told him the Alpha had stopped. This was his chance. Tyler raised his shotgun, his eyes locking on the shadowy figure behind the trees. He fired again. They met back at that damned clearing. Lara stood in the middle, dressed in oversized clothes she'd found in the cabin, holding a shotgun in one hand and a bundle of clothes for Riley in the other. She glanced around uneasily. The moon peeked cautiously through the clouds, casting an eerie glow. Her stomach churned. Bodies. So many bodies, men and women. She quickly counted 9. Her chest ached. Why? Why did it have to be like this? Riley had obediently stayed in the car. Lara could only hope he wouldn't do something foolish or run off again. Not now, when his entire pack was dead. She was younger than him, but it didn't matter anymore. Her words carried the weight of a command, and Riley had no choice but to obey. He better not even think about defying me, she thought, clenching her fists. Tyler emerged from the trees, slightly unsteady, and gave her a faint smile. Neither of them had the strength to speak. Lara had been sure he was alive, but she'd feared being wrong. If the Alpha hadn't heard her howl, if it hadn't been distracted, she didn't want to think about it. It was over. That was all that mattered. They decided to leave the bodies for the real wild animals. The forests here were dense, and the recent attacks had likely scared off any tourists. In a few days, little would remain of the corpses. The morning light brought relief after the seemingly endless night. Lara stood by the car. Riley, wearing ill-fitting clothes, shuffled awkwardly a short distance away. Everyone felt uncomfortable. Lara didn't know what to do with her hands, or herself. Since returning to their human forms, she and Riley had barely spoken. Tyler was inspecting the car. The roof was severely dented. Deep claw marks marred the surface, and the windshield was shattered. No way to blame it on a bear. Lara watched as sunlight filtered through the trees. The world carried on, as if nothing had happened, as if there hadn't been a bloodbath just hours ago in the depths of the forest. The drive back was silent. Riley slept in the back seat. Lara drove while Tyler dozed in the passenger seat. She had practically forced him to rest. Strangely, she didn't feel tired herself. Maybe it was the lingering adrenaline, keeping her wired. Or maybe, after everything she'd seen, she was afraid of the nightmares that would follow once she closed her eyes. She called Emma closer to noon, silently giving her friend permission to sleep in. They still had nearly a day of travel ahead of them. There was no rush. Back in Maymount Lake, Lara's first stop was home, where she indulged in a proper shower. A few days on the hunt had worn her down, but she had to hurry. There were only a few hours left until the full moon. At the station, Emma greeted her with an enthusiastic hug, saying nothing about Riley, who sat nearby with a sulky expression. Judging by his mood, Birkenbridge had either given him a piece of her mind or followed through on her earlier threat to hit him. Lara smirked and headed toward Tyler's office. She wanted to talk to him. Since their return, they'd barely spoken, as if they were back to being reluctant partners. Would they continue hunting? Would they even remain friends? She barely understood what kind of relationship they had anymore. Tyler sat at his desk, sipping coffee, as though the gruesome trip, the night of screams and blood, had never happened. Then again, this wasn't his first such night. It was just one of many, perhaps a bloodier one than usual. Lara forced a smile and sat uninvited in the chair opposite him. He looked up at her and out of nowhere asked, "Are you okay?" Lara let out a loud breath. There was no point in lying. "No. And you?" Tyler rubbed the bridge of his nose. "No." "Great," she muttered, letting out a nervous laugh. Of course, only maniacs would be fine after something like this. The sheriff studied her thoughtfully, his gaze steady and unyielding, just like in the archives. Then, with surprising gratitude, he said, "Thank you. I know it was you who distracted the Alpha." Lara couldn't hide her triumphant smile. She narrowed her eyes playfully. "Yeah, it was me. So what do I get for it?" Tyler took a long sip from his mug, grimaced, and said, "I'll replace the coffee machine. This one's terrible." Lara raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the response she had expected. "Make sure it has a milk frother." "Emma and I will appreciate it," she quipped, hiding her unpleasant thoughts behind her usual smirk. Twirling a pen between her fingers, she added more seriously, "What now?" Tyler stared at his half-empty cup, as if it had suddenly become far more interesting than their conversation. "I know exactly what you're thinking," Tyler said, keeping his gaze fixed on his desk, as if avoiding her eyes. "It's not worth it, Lara. I've checked. I've tried. You're still young. Don't ruin your life with this hunting. You don't have to." She cut him off sharply. "Oh, so you want me to just go back to school, quietly study birds after everything that's happened? And you? What, you're just going to check traps in the woods every night and pretend it's over? Pretend monsters don't exist anymore?" The sheriff let out a tired sigh. "Stubborn girl. You don't even want to try? Try what? Living a normal life? Getting a dog, a family, and putting up a white picket fence?" she asked with a crooked smile. "Do you honestly think I can just forget all of this? The hunts, the way we had each other's backs? How we protected each other even when it was dangerous? And..." She hesitated, her voice dropping lower. "Do you think I can just forget about you?" Tyler's eyebrows shot up. He opened his mouth to respond, but Lara didn't give him the chance. In one swift motion, she stood up, stepped closer, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and kissed him. Firmly, insistently, giving him no room to pull away. Not that he tried. Slowly, he gave in to the kiss. She pulled back reluctantly. "If you ever tell me again to forget everything and just go home, you'll be the most despicable bastard I've ever met," she finished with a warning edge to her voice. Tyler looked at her surprised. "I wasn't going to." "Oh, relax, I'm joking," she laughed, shaking her head. Would he ever learn to catch her humor? "Hey, lovebirds." Emma's head popped through the office door, followed by a dramatic snort. Lara's eyes widened, and Tyler waved her in, pretending he hadn't heard her comment. "Well, while you two were gone, I was busy too," Emma announced with a smug grin. "I found this legend that says turning into a werewolf slows down a vampire's blood flow. So how about a miracle cocktail on the next full moon?" Lara grimaced. "That sounds disgusting." "And where exactly are you going to find vampire blood?" Emma's grin turned mischievous. "I figured you'd hate it." "Fine, I'll pitch it to Riley instead," she teased. "And then you can tell me all about how it went. No arguments." Lara couldn't suppress a laugh. Yep, her brother was lucky to have this one. As the final hours before the full moon ticked down, conversations wound to a close. Lara took Tyler by the hand and pulled him aside, far enough that neither Emma nor Riley could overhear. "Riley and I need to be in the cells tonight," she said firmly. She no longer saw it as a restriction. It was simply a necessary precaution, probably the most effective and the only reliable one they had. And Riley had better not complain. Tyler nodded in understanding. "Should I stay at the station?" Lara shrugged. "It'd make me feel better, but it's up to you. I promise I won't hurt you. Worst case scenario, you'll just lick me again?" he joked, smirking. "Exactly. So stay. I think it'll make us both feel better." "Fine. But let's make sure the locks on those doors are solid this time, okay? No licking incidents tonight." Tyler smiled, and for a moment, Lara realized she'd been seeing his smile more often lately. "Let's head to the neighboring town next week," he said casually, jingling the keys on his belt. "Emma mentioned something about a ghost terrorizing a retirement home. Do you even need to ask?" Her eyes lit up with excitement. The full moon didn't scare her anymore. Neither did monsters or nightmares. She was the nightmare. Tyler reached out and touched her hand, the gesture almost tender. Something unusual for him. His fingers brushed her face, tucking a fiery, curling strand of hair behind her ear. The beast inside her closed its eyes contentedly. Whatever this was between them, it was clear. Tyler was her person, and it seemed all three of them knew it.